The sky above the port was the color of a television tuned to a dead channel. William Gibson, Neuromancer. The Daily Grind, Chapter 189. So, you just have to think about it and you get a sword? Morgan asked, feeling a little silly as he said the words. Even for his current lifestyle, there were limits. I mean, that sounds cool, I guess. The other teenager he was walking with gave a shrug that didn't do much to cover up a boastful smile. It is cool, Liam admitted. But it's not just thinking about it. He paused, trailing off. The new pickups in the order, around Morgan's age, some of whom he'd actually talked to, had been remarkably cagey about what exactly their magic was. Like they were keeping it from the adults. And from him, too. We have to focus on the spell for a while, Liam said eventually. And then it sticks into a slot in our souls, I guess, and then we can use it. He shut up as the two teenagers went up to the counter of the convenience store they had been walking to and paid for their snacks under the suspicious leer of the older woman behind the counter. Morgan waited until they'd left before speaking up again. So, like D&D wizards, right? He asked. That's not my thing, Liam admitted. Link's more into the game stuff. I just like the action. I guess that's why I'm good with the sword. Emma's better at the defensive stuff. Link, I guess, good at whatever else. Miscellaneous? Okay, well, it's like wizards, Morgan said, foregoing a long-winded explanation both of Dungeons and Dragons and of correcting Liam's pronunciation of the word miscellaneous. He could have gone into extensive detail, but he'd been recalcitrant to actually talk about his new hobby with anybody. Still cool, he admitted. The other boy wore an even more entrenched, self-satisfied grin as he popped open a bag of chips and started eating while they crossed the street and started the half-mile walk back toward the lair. So what's your mutant superpower? Liam asked. What? Morgan gave him a confused look, mouth half full of a candy bar that was novel by the fact that it was actually manufactured on the surface of Earth. You know, your magic, or whatever. What can you do? Morgan gave a drawn-out and awkward, before saying, I store my breath as some kind of mana. That's mostly on accident, because I didn't die in a snowstorm. Oh, I'm mostly immune to cancer. Liam laughed. Wait, I thought everyone at this place was a wizard or something. No, man, that's mostly just James. And Momo, I guess. And, like, a lot of people have something they've picked up or they're good at, but I don't know. Mars is just a good engineer who has access to magic items, you know? Morgan shrugged. I just live there. Wait, you live there? Liam looked incredulous. Are you being held prisoner or something? Do we need to rescue you? He dropped his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. A car drove by on the street. The concrete of the sidewalk darkened as a grim cloud overtook the thin breach the sun was coming through. The late December wind shoved against their coats, trying its best to convince them to stop snacking and put their hands back in their fucking pockets. Morgan just looked around the outside they were currently standing in, a half-mile from the lair, all on their own, unsupervised. No? He said. What? No. But where do you stay? Liam asked incredulously. In one of the rooms? I have my own room. Morgan got defensive before he paused and started to add, well, technically, I guess Color of Dawn and I share a... The rooms are tiny. It's like sleeping in a prison, Liam burst out. You can't live there. Do your parents just not care about you? Where do you go to church? Briefly, Morgan considered if his ongoing martial arts and strength training would let him punch through the other teenager, but then he remembered the attitude everyone else had shown to him when he'd been an asshole, and he tried to let Liam's dumbass words just wash over him. Well, he started, my mom's dead. Morgan said it casually, weaponizing the awkward aura like it was nuclear fallout. My dad literally forgot she existed and turned into an abusive alcoholic, so you're not wrong. He shot Liam a look, noting the now horrified expression on his walking companion's face. But also, shut the fuck up, Morgan added pointedly. Liam flinched as he swore, but did backtrack immediately. Oh, I'm sorry. Wait, shouldn't you be, like, living with other family or something? That doesn't explain the tiny room. What Morgan wanted to explain, but couldn't be sure he'd be able to say without sounding excessively defensive and, well, small, really, was that the room he had now was bigger than where he had been living before. So instead, he replied to a different part of the sentence. I have a family, he told Liam. I do live with them. No, like your real family. Wow, that is such a shitty thing to say. The words came out without Morgan thinking about them. He was just too shocked by it. Why would you say that? He asked. It was kind of weird. Morgan had never really been a very social person. He'd practically been terrified of talking to other kids at school, avoided conversations whenever possible. He'd had one friend, basically, and then when he'd first come to the Order, he'd made one friend and been fine with that, too. But every single part of his daily life was a learning moment now, in some way, and someone wiser than Morgan had once said that if no one makes you do something, it counts as fun. So he'd learned, bit by bit, to fit into the local culture where everyone put a ton of effort into being earnest with each other, apologizing with sincerity, and acting with a general level of trust. And those social walls he'd built for himself he had also dismantled, bit by bit, simply by getting straight answers on why people acted the way they did, and trying to give those answers himself in return. And now, here he was, seeing someone be kind of an enormous asshole directly to him, and the only thing he could think was that from a broader perspective, Liam was getting really defensive for no reason. He wasn't even listening to the words anymore as the other kid tried to explain himself, and also tell Morgan how he was still wrong. He was just sort of marveling, partly at what it felt like to suddenly realize that he had all the tools to pick apart the details of a sentence without getting angry about it, and partly at just how committed to looking like he was right Liam was. My dude, Morgan jumped in during a pause in Liam's ramble when the other boy had to stop for breath eventually. I live with people who make sure I'm not hungry. I have a really good bed. It's fine, okay? I'm fine with it. I like it. Also, there's movie nights and stuff, okay? Okay, Liam said slowly. But, like, what are you going to do for college? Like, if your parents don't cover it? As much as Morgan felt like Liam was from a completely alien culture, that was actually a good question. I don't know, he said. I mean, I don't know what I want to do, I guess. I'll ask James about the college thing later. Wait, so is James kind of like your dad? Liam asked, trying to put things into a context he could understand. Please no, Morgan said with a long sigh. He's just, Morgan stopped and thought about the sentence. Wait, fuck, he muttered, getting another flinch from Liam. Okay, I don't have a good answer for that. Morgan felt like he owed whoever taught him that he could just say that some kind of life debt. But no, anyway. The two of them took a corner, and the lair came into sight. The flat box of a building, looking pretty inauspicious. Just another normal flex space warehouse in a line of the things. The magic inside, utterly hidden from the outside world. You guys are sticking around for a bit, right? Morgan asked. Liam groaned dramatically. No one wants to let us go back until they can make sure the alchemists won't murder us. Not that I can't take 'em, he boasted inaccurately. But we're here for a couple more days. Cool, Morgan nodded. Want to hang out with Color of Dawn and me and play Street Fighter? Yeah, okay, Liam said slowly. Morgan had another one of those moments where he could almost instantly put together that his potential new friend was trying not to seem too eager because he was afraid of looking dumb in front of someone. And suddenly he just kind of got it. He got why James liked the way the Order did things so much better, because he'd talked to a dozen people in the last week and never once been afraid of them. Liam was being defensive and holding back because he didn't trust the whole conversation. Not that he didn't trust Morgan specifically, he probably hadn't even thought of that, but he was actually worried about being open at all to anyone. That was kind of depressing. Had Morgan ever been like that? Probably. He couldn't really remember, but he had never really thought about it that way. Even with weekly therapy sessions, a lot of his life over the last 4 years blurred into a haze of foggy uncertainty. But, yeah, he was pretty sure he'd been like that. He didn't say any of that out loud. He didn't feel like he needed to, though it did really go a long way toward explaining why the other 3 kids weren't explaining to the Order what their magic system was. Instead, he just gave a reassuring nod, said, "Cool," and led the way back into the lair. Small steps. "It's been 3 days," Alana told James from the door to his office that he was inexplicably in again. "And still no problems, and it's office day, and I really want to do that." "Oh God, office day," James groaned, throwing his arms back over his head and tilting his chair backward. "I forgot about office day." "How the hell have you gotten to a point where exploring the magical extra-dimensional world full of arcane pens is the thing you forget?" Alana demanded of him, folding her arms judgmentally. "I've been busy," James said. "With lots of stuff, I guess. I spent all of yesterday with Bill because he dragged Arush and I out to run experiments with the heat transfer spell, and holy shit, that is exhausting." He paused, idly tapping a pen on the table while he formed a thought. "Also, can I just say, Bill's a really impressive dude." "How so?" Alana asked. "I mean, yeah, he is, but how specifically are you thinking?" James framed an empty space in front of him with his hands. "Okay, what exactly would you classify Arush as?" "Adorably gay," Alana said instantly. "No, wait, you mean to a random person. Kind of terrifying, probably, with the extra arms and the acid drippy thing and the... Is it pronounced chitin? Chitin? I've never gotten a clear answer on... Wait, there wasn't a problem with that, was there?" "There was not. That was my point," James nodded. "Bill is so aggressively meritocratic it is almost painful to watch. I think he likes Arush more than me, just because Arush can carry more things at once." He rubbed at the ache in his shoulders, a reminder of yesterday's hard labor. "I don't know, he's kind of the closest thing we have to an outside perspective around here right now, along with our lawyer, and I get that that'll keep on fading over time as we indoctrinate them, but it's just nice to have a normal person who has no problem with non-human life," he concluded. "Okay, yeah, that's a start," Alana conceded. "He's not doing the your dad thing, is he?" "My dad continues to be missing, Alana," James said slowly. "I'm not sure what you... Oh, you mean the really unpleasant version of pseudo-tolerance, don't you? Damn it." James pinched the bridge of his nose. "No, he's not doing that. He actually did acknowledge it too, sort of, which is also weird. Of course, then he had us generate a test flow system for a small building's internal temperature control, which he was obviously more interested in." Alana nodded sagely. "I have this running theory that everyone is secretly a massive nerd once you get them interested in something." "Sure, that makes sense. I've met sports fans," James agreed. "Anyway, I'm tired, but I'm up for office things, if you're going." "I am going," Alana confirmed. "If it's on the table, obviously." James rolled his eyes. "You know I'm not the one to make that decision." He cocked an eyebrow at Alana's responding snort. "No, really," James said. "I'm fine making decisions that are things I'm good at, but security is Nate's department now, and the people he's training. Just like how I'm leaving buy an office building to Karen to secure the office. I know it's a good idea, but how the heck am I supposed to go about doing that? I shouldn't be in charge of that project. There was a metal chunk noise from out in the main office space they still had a lease on, here in the LA skyline, that made Alana jump slightly. James didn't react because he knew it was just someone using the vending machine they had stolen and placed there, but he did give his partner a worried look. He was about to say something to her when the person who had been using the vending machine poked her head around the door, Momo wedging herself between the frame and Alana's torso. "Hey, boss," she declared, eliciting a glare from James as she smiled back at him. "Can I have the list?" Alana's brief panic washed away. "What list?" she asked. "We don't do lists here." "That's a lie at best," James laughed at her. "You know research has a massive spreadsheet of skills and stuff from the dungeon, right? Oh, did you know someone just has operations-blender as a skill?" "Hey, don't joke about that," Momo said, starting to lose her balance. "I've been a barista. Blenders are serious shit." She twisted her neck in a way that James was reasonably sure wasn't physically possible for a baseline human, so that she could look up at Alana. "Also, it's the list of the new kid's skills." James held up the notebook he was tapping at with his pen and passed it across the desk as Momo scurried in to grab it from his hand. "A, I need that back later," he said. "B, I don't think this is all of them, and C, they call them spells." He did not add that every time the kids he had interviewed called them spells, they did so with a hitch in their voices, like they were meaning to call them something different. "Sure," Momo agreed. "Anything good?" "Well, they work like D&D wizards," James said. "I don't see any obvious synergies with anything else we have. Not really, anyway. But they've got something that lets them block attacks. Oh, they bought those shields off eBay, by the way. They've got the thing for the big dome shield." "Is that the one that Super Grand said was a fate thingy?" Momo interjected. "Yes," James said before casually continuing, ticking off on his fingers as he went. "They've got a thing for manifesting swords. Research apparently got one of them to try that, and they're worse than the sword that JP carries everywhere." He shrugged. "Then they told me they have a handful of things that I categorize as why. C's seat makes a chair. Dire prune seems to actively remove matter, but only dead matter that's on plants and is harmful to the plant. One of them called Saint's Wrap lets them make a towel." He looked up at the other two in his doorway. Alana coughed into her fist. "Sorry, towel? Like a hand towel?" "I mean, a shower towel. A me-sized shower towel, not a you-sized shower towel. It's not a great towel, from what I understand," James said with a shrug. "They're magic, and I hate to say this, but it sucks. I feel they must have missed something in their dungeon, or, again, they are lying to us." "Well, they did trap you in a dome of doom fog or something," Momo said. "And anything with the term fate applied to it cannot be good, right?" "Yeah, I figure... Oh, excuse me." James paused as there was a skittering noise, and then an upside-down Rufus scurried into his office with the same energy that Momo had earlier, only doing so on a rope of paper clips that was hanging from the ceiling. James reached up and took the manila folder that Rufus passed to him with outstretched pen legs. "Thanks, buddy," he said. "Hey, we're going to the office tonight. You want to come along and explore a bit?" Rufus's singular eye stared at James with a disbelieving, unblinking gaze, before slowly raising his forelegs to cross in front of his face, dangling from the paper clips like a spider. Somehow, despite the motion being a simple negative, it really felt like he was flipping off the larger human. "Okay," James said easily. "Just thought I'd ask." He added the folder to his desk while Rufus scuttled out of the room again. "Is that why those are there?" Alana said with a bemused expression. "Yeah, he doesn't want to get stepped on, and honestly, this is a perfectly reasonable compromise," James said. "Because also, no one wants to step on Rufus anyway. I'm going to have Bill rig up something more permanent before I let him drag me out to be a human HVAC again. Assuming this isn't a Strider superpower to hang from paperclips specifically, I should ask on that. Hey Rufus, he called, and got no response. Okay, I'll ask on that later. Anyway, where were we? I was going to ask if you wanted to go for a jog before tonight, and you were complaining about buying a building? Alana said, with a shrug. Oh, and Momo was interrupting me. I was not. James smiled at the words. Oh, right, speaking of which, Momo, there's a few ideas getting batted around about how the kids are missing their Dungeons version of magic items, or missing how to actually equip their spells properly, or, again, deception. Can you talk to them sometime? But, like, be sneaky about it. Sneaky how and why? Momo asked with narrowed eyes. Well, they're teenagers, James said, and they're not bad people, but they are exactly who we should be thinking of when we say that someone isn't ready for power. He shrugged. But we're still willing to trade kind of a lot for information about their dungeon, information that they don't seem willing or perhaps capable of giving us, at least not directly. So that's your job. Make friends and be indirect. You are sending Momo to be a diplomat. Alana raised her eyebrows. Yeah, what she said. Momo twisted her arm around to point behind herself. I don't make friends. You literally do, James stared at her. You were on Sarah's podcast literally yesterday, discussing literal infomorph inception methods. You make friends. I thought you didn't listen to that. You said you didn't have time. I don't listen to that. Texture of Barkdust gave me a .mem file, James said, tapping his skulljack. Don't tell Sarah. Anyway, get out of my office, you gremlin. Momo slipped under where Alana was leaning on the doorframe again, opting to not simply go around, muttering all the while about how she was going to set off a totem underneath the kids just so they'd avoid her. James really doubted that would work the way she expected, but it was an interesting thought experiment. Well, that was Momo, Alana said, clearing her throat. Doesn't make friends, my ass, James grumbled. Looking back up at his girlfriend, who was still shaking her head, he asked, A jog? Really? Here? No, outside, you dumbass, Alana smirked at him. It'll be good for you. Also, we've got a ton of exercise potions, so you won't even be sore. Oh my god, I could just take one now! James slapped his forehead. My poor shoulders! In response to his groaning, Alana held up a thin glass vial filled with red liquid and waggled it back and forth in her hand. I'll give you this if you come running with me. God damn it, we've upgraded to running, James groaned again as he pushed himself to his feet. Okay, but I'm getting a drink first. His partner waited patiently while he picked a random drink, blindly covered the label, cracked it open, and took a sip, and then made a horrified noise at the flavor of drinking a pancake. Alana watched on as James's face twisted in concern, and then he took another sip. Stop drinking it, she exclaimed after the third sip and third moan from him. I can't. I've committed to this, James said before gulping down the last of the can. And before feeling something hit the back of his throat, which almost made him choke slightly before a small burst of pressure formed in his mouth, and a thought ran through his head, even as a squawk left his throat. Shell upgraded. Breathing. Exhalation force. PSI plus 14.8. Did you just drink an orb? Alana asked, giving the vending machine an unreturned high five that was really more of a pat on its side. Ah, my tongue. James poked at his mouth. Also, what a weird orb. Great, no need to feel guilty for not copying it then, Alana told him. Now, let's go. I've been standing around for half an hour and I want to move. James chuckled and followed after her, the two of them both looking forward to later that evening. Okay, so... Chavoy held up a paperweight as an example. Not the paperweight, just one that was lying around. It wasn't actually a paperweight, except in the technical sense it was a polished rock, but it was the thought that counted, and it was flat. The paperweight, she said, is incapable of moving in a single direction relative to its own orientation, but it can be rotated to change this axis. If it is entirely upright, the plane of movement is limited to the horizontal plane. If you tilt it slightly, it will now act as if on a slope, and will thus move down and sideways due to gravity. If you then push the paperweight toward the upward part of the slope, it will likewise get a higher position. You can think of this somewhat like a wing. Next to her, Mars nodded like an enthusiastic puppy, a massive grin on his face. The interesting part comes when you have more than one paperweight. If you have two of them, at an angle comparable to the ground, but one goes uphill in the north direction while the other goes uphill south, you can now rise in elevation by pushing them apart with no contact with the ground. Of course, there's a limit on how far you can practically push two objects apart with a piston or piston-esque device, but that's not the point. Anesh stared at the two of them, and then looked around the research floor, wondering why no one would meet his questioning look. Even the pod of domesticated, well, semi-domesticated, Shalaxes, snug in their pen in the middle of the floor, looked like they were trying to avoid the conversation somehow. This was, clearly, something that had already been inflicted on everyone here, multiple times from the way that nobody would meet his eyes. All right, first off, Anesh cleared his throat. I was lured down here because Reed said he had a couple of questions about infusing blue orbs. Also, while that is cool, and I am all about getting us to space, do not get me wrong, I am here for a reason, and... Wait, wouldn't that setup not work once you got too far out of a gravity well anyway? That seems... Anesh realized what was happening. He was getting trapped too. But this was kind of neat anyway. We aren't finished yet, Chavoy declared, tossing their example rock onto her desk and settling a hand on her hip as she chastised Anesh. Ah, of course you aren't, Anesh sighed. Mars kept going like he hadn't even stopped talking, and all of the momentum was driving him forward like some kind of rocket engine. So what's really important is that the paperweight can rotate. He was rapping his knuckles together for emphasis as he spoke, the pattern one of a rehearsed speech. If placed on a track of some sort, it should be able to move as long as the plane of allowed movement is tangential to the trajectory of the paperweight going through space at all points. Do you see? He sees, Chavoy nodded. Anesh did see, unfortunately. He saw a world where their greatest enemy became OSHA over anyone else. He rubbed a hand down his face. So you are suggesting, and correct me if I'm wrong here, that we make several copies of the magical paperweight, link them in some kind of wheel, and essentially build the world's least safe helicopter. The pair looked back at him with wide eyes. Well, Alana did recently ask for a helicopter, Anesh mused. Chavoy ran a hand over her mouth as she thought about the practical applications that way, but then, when she actually spoke, said, No, don't be silly. This wouldn't be able to easily operate on a multi-axis system without serious resource investment. Yeah, we've built the world's least safe elevator, Mars corrected. We actually have a small prototype, Chavoy added. Not here, obviously, because no one wanted to risk... us. Anesh snorted. That's fair, he interjected briefly. The engineers were undeterred, though, and Mars kept going. It's actually not that unsafe. The locking mechanism works fine. We've tested it to 200 feet. It appears to consistently keep itself geostationary, so building a large-scale one with things like safety features and security, I guess, that would be pretty easy, is the point. Anyway, we built you a space elevator that can technically reach orbit with a bike pedal and a metal platform, Chavoy added gleefully. Happy birthday. You work for NASA, right? There were no words for this situation. There was no way to have prepared for this, Anesh realized. He wasn't even mad at them, obviously. But normally when people got him gifts, he politely thanked them and then hid for the rest of the day because the act of receiving a gift was harrowing. This, this was untenable. He could not hide from a space elevator. One of the Shalaxes noticed his mild confusion masquerading as distress and waddled over on its cable tendrils to butt itself against the little fence that kept them all in, chiming at him softly in error tones. Anesh blinked and focused on what he was doing, stooping down to pet the boxy creature. Gingerbread Cookie read the name tag piece of electrical tape on its shell. Anesh chuckled at it. The research department was having to dig deep to find new names for these little friends. He looked up to Mars and Chavoy. Okay, he said calmly. So, to be clear on this, at one point, James and I mentioned the future of humanity in space travel in passing. And then you designed a space elevator. Yes, they said at the same time. This is like we asked you to pass some catch-up, and you went out and pulled a heist on a McDonald's cargo ship. Anesh patted the Shalaxi one more time and stood up, dusting his hands off and trying to ignore his knee popping in the socket. It's very cool. I very much love it. I really do. But mates, I came down here to ask about the blue orb thing. I really don't have time to talk about how... I mean... This revolutionizes launches, at least, in terms of cost. We could probably rent out... No. He shook a finger at them accusingly like they were the problem and not his own brain seeing the implication. The orbs, he said. Reed, sensing the threat of being caught in another engineering explanation was mostly past, walked by lugging a deep cardboard box full of pens. They're infusions like life for every other orb color, he called out to Anesh as he walked by. Anesh waving to the engineers to break off and trail in Reed's wake as he made his way over to a shelf along the wall of an overcrowded corridor, slamming the box down into an empty spot. Whew. Yeah, they're life. Alex is right, but you can't make them like normal life. It doesn't work. They're just a tiny bit of intelligent decision-making, not an actual person. Well, that's ethically shaky, determining what is and isn't a person, now isn't it? Anesh hummed as he pursed his lips at Reed, face contorting in concern. The curly-haired head of research waved him off with one hand while he rearranged something in his box. Look, we have a lot of weird shit down here. Let me just tell you that we've run a bunch of different tests for communication or emotion, all sorts of stuff on the blue items, before we even started trying to make them. Anesh wasn't quite sure he believed that, but he was on a time limit. Can you just tell me what I really need to know so I can pass it along? The basics? Dungeon tech items are slightly alive. Not people, though, and they are really, really rigid in focus. Ethically, if you really want to measure it, and I don't, it's probably more okay to make a magic item than to, eat chicken. Anyway, your best bet is making things that add one strange function to something that already does a thing. Like, no trying to turn a stick into headphones, Turn headphones into headphones that do a weird headphone thing. He shrugged. We're working on more stuff. Oh, someone made a paper dragon that's kind of like what you said Pendragon was as a baby. Can you ask Dave to come by and make sure we're not screwing anything up? Reed, how much life are you making down here? Not too much. Reed flushed red, not meeting Anesh's eyes as he used one thick hand to cover one of his cheeks in a squishing motion. Anyway, I have to go check on some stuff. We'll catch up later, okay? Sure. Anesh didn't know if he should groan or laugh. James would laugh, probably, but James wasn't here. His boyfriend was off doing something. Hey, quick thing, though. What happened to your lab coat? Anesh asked. What? Reed blinked at him, embarrassment temporarily forgotten. What lab coat? Well, you're just in pants and shirt today. Where's the lab coat? Anesh clarified. Reed shook his head slowly, mouth slightly open, eyes narrowed. I have never once worn a lab coat here. Oh, that's rather strange. I always think of you as being in a lab coat, I suppose. Get out of my basement, Reed grumbled, stalking off with a fresh red tinge on his neck. The alchemists called them while James was in a van traveling to an office building he had long since stopped actually working at. Not him personally. The Order. Recovery, really. Or Karen. Her department, anyway. They were handling it. No one had specifically kept him up to date, but he was following the conversation as updates were posted on the discussion server. The alchemists had a problem. There was some kind of internal schism going on with them, a problem that had been brewing for a long time, and James had gotten flat looks from the others in the vehicle when he had said that out loud, and only just now started to boil over. Euphrates, who had made the independent decision to sell out his colleagues, was confirmed dead, but the alchemists weren't talking about any other losses. Still, it looked dire for them. From information the Order's rogues could piece together, based on the new contact with the alchemists, they had made hidden enemies of a few specific CIA operatives, the kind that looked unrealistic when they got Hollywood movies made about them. They had been, in some way, coerced to resume work on the puppet potion and failed miserably, realized what they were doing in failing, and had started tearing each other apart, trying to find someone to blame, or fight, or bribe, or anything to get out of the hole they had dug for themselves. If they're gonna self-destruct, fucking let 'em, Alana suggested from the driver's seat. Did try to kill you, Arush hissed at James from the back of the van. Twice. Technically it was only... Oh, wait, no, twice. James winced. Okay, yeah, you're right. Elle shifted in her seat, the thin blue line of fins from her infomorph companion spiraling around her shoulder as she moved to look over the center console at James. You have too many enemies. I do not. They aren't even my enemies, he protested. They tried to kill you, Elle shouted at him. Twice, apparently. So did you, James retaliated. You shot me. Before the two of them could start arguing more, Arush leaned forward slightly, chitin creaking under the pressure of his seatbelt, and pressed a pair of rough hands against their faces, pushing the two of them apart and back into their seats. Hush, he rasped out at Elle. Okay, Elle's shit aside, Alana started. Hey! She continued unabated. Is there any reason not to just let him burn out? You want the tactical or the strategic reason? James asked, shifting to a more serious tone. Yeah, both. Hit me, Alana said with a grin. James smiled out the windshield, watching the streetlights flash by as they rode down the highway toward the dungeon. He had missed the particular orange lights of his childhood, but there was something harshly pure about the bright white bulbs that had been installed in the last few years. They went well with the freezing rain pattering on the windshield. Okay, he said. Tactically, we cannot let their tree of life, or whatever they call it, fall into the hands of someone who might be worse than them. Also, I want it, in general, so, base greed. I like that one, Elle perked up, and Arush nodded along with her. He understood the value of a material advantage. James rolled his eyes at the words. Strategically, though? Guys, they're still people. They're old, and they have fucked up dramatically and hurt a lot of other people, and they're assholes, but who gives a shit? They aren't literal monsters. They're just wrong about some stuff. They don't deserve to die, and yeah, we could probably spend our resources helping people who need it more, but they're here now, they're in our sights, we can help, we should help. That is not a strategy. Elle made air quotes at him from the back seat around the last word. That's just you wanting to feel smug. Arush nodded next to her, triangular head bobbing subconsciously in time with Alana's music. That was probably a bad sign. The agreeing with L part, not the music appreciation. Also, L added, buoyed by her backseat companion's agreement, we know about a bunch of problems that aren't rich old guys having dug their own rich old guy graves. Let's solve those. The van lurched slightly as Alana pivoted them around a slow-moving truck, making lane changes like she couldn't die. I mean, Elle's got a point. Your strategy isn't really strategic, she told James with a sympathetic look. Okay, you want a game theory version? James rolled his eyes. Yeah, sure, Elle chimed in. Oh, Elle, dear sweet Eleanor. Alana shook her head. Don't call me that. James started talking, ignoring both their snark and the fact that Alana knew that he was about to begin monologuing. Okay, you want to know why? Here's why. We live in a world where one person can acquire a kind of horrifying amount of power. He paused briefly for effect. I'm not just talking about us here, either, with dungeons and magic and stuff, but that is a problem, and it's only going to get worse. Bigger, too. But even mundane people can stockpile wealth, weapons, influence, anything. Hell, even just owning a car makes you a potential mass murderer. He pointed at Elle, and then, trying not to let her notice, also slyly pointed out Alana to the two passengers watching him from the back. Arush hissed out a noise that might have been a laugh that ended with a strangled sound as Alana accelerated the van slightly. The good news is, James continued, no one really wants to be a mass murderer. People are only motivated to take extreme action, in general, by two things: overwhelming hate or overwhelming love. If someone hates strongly enough, they start looking for ways to destroy what they hate, and usually they're fine self-destructing doing it. If someone loves enough, they'll do the same thing to protect whatever they care about, and usually protect themselves too. Every other motivation tends to be kind of fragile in the grand scheme of things. The optimal strategy in this game, this life thing that we have ourselves trapped in, is to maximize love. Not because it's sappy and warm and fuzzy and nice, but it is all of those things, but so that all the eventual superpowered nightmares in our society have a vested interest in keeping us all alive. Everyone went quiet as they processed that, and it was Arush that spoke up first. Like you, he rasped out. Like me, James said softly. Like Alana, like you, he pointed at Elle. And eventually like you too, he pointed the finger at Arush next. We're ahead. Not of everyone, no, he preempted Alana's grim reminder. But we're ahead of a lot of people in terms of magic, and with how the dungeons work, we're only going to get stronger and stronger and more dangerous. Yeah, so that brings us back to the old guys, Elle said, leaning forward against her seatbelt, elbows on her knees. Man, they've had all that dangerous stockpiled power stuff for, what, 20 years? More? They're probably older than I am, and they did shit with it. Like, okay, you want the tree, that's cool. I'm good with extorting the shit out of them, but we don't need to be nice. It's not about them, James said with a shrug, feeling not a small bit of disappointment that Elle didn't immediately get it. Arush's head snapped up, eyes glittering within the reflected streetlights. Ah, he hissed. It's us. What? Elle turned to look at him. We... The rat roach still struggled to talk. James felt a pang of guilt in his chest for engaging Arush in active conversation when he still hadn't accepted a skulljack or even figured out how to safely use the shaper substance yet. But Arush, struggling to breathe, still pushed on. We need practice. With love. He looked over at Elle. With being different than I have been. With protecting. They need practice being protected. They? The old guys? Elle asked, rustling through her backpack and passing to Rush a bottle of water without even thinking about it. They don't need shit, though. They've got their own... Oh. She suddenly turned, looking forward, meeting James's eyes in the rearview mirror. You want them on your team, she said. Like, not just vaguely. You want them specifically. Alana started laughing, barking a heavy, loud laugh that had a hard edge of respect behind it. Holy shit, she said, with a shark smile on her face, wiping a tear out of her eye while she stayed focused on the road. They're a bunch of people with massive stockpiled power, in a few different forms, and none of it has kept them safe. They're at their absolute lowest point, and you want to swoop in and save their asses. Holy shit. I mean, yeah, James said. Isn't that the point? We want everyone on our team, and that means we need to help everyone. We need to prove to them that our team isn't just viable, but that we're the fucking winners. That at the end of this, when everything collapses, we walk out of here, and that they can come with us. He shrugged casually. And yeah, we need to be able to forgive some of the shittier things people have done before, and that won't be easy, because some of these guys are really, really awful. He turned the exhalation into a chuckle. But I believe in us. We can't just keep finding reasons why it's okay to hurt each other. We gotta make it stop somewhere. Shit, man, now I believe in us too. Elle threw herself back against the van's padded seat hard enough that the old plastic frame creaked. I can't believe you've done this. I already believed, Arush said, handing her back the empty water bottle with one of his smaller limbs. Of course you did. You're basically proof of concept, Elle snorted. The rat roach froze momentarily, tilting his head to look down at the girl next to him. I don't know what... He started to chitter, chest heaving. Elle, to her credit, instantly realized that her words hadn't been properly interpreted. Oh yeah, no, I mean, you're like an example of the strategy working. I'm not a bad thing, she said quickly. I think? James, help, you know words. No, yeah, that's it, James said with an unseen nod. Also, good timing, Alana said as she took them off the highway. We're here. She pointed out the windshield at the multi-story office building, visible from the raised roads they had just turned onto over the tops of the trees. A tiny portion of its lights were still on. James just started double-checking his pockets, while Elle made sure her backpack was zipped up everywhere. But Arush had never seen this place before. Hell, Arush had barely seen a lot of the outside world before at all that wasn't one small, destroyed town in Tennessee. The towering rat roach leaned across Elle to watch the building in the distance as the road led them on a looping half-circle of right turns toward the parking lot's entrance. All of his eyes held open as he took in the building. Part of his mind, the part that still couldn't escape where he'd come from, was sizing up an enemy. Ways in, ways out, how many foes or victims could a building of that size hold? If he had to break bones to fit through any of the passageways, could he do it? That kind of thing. But the new part of him was looking at something else. A solid, unyielding concrete spire with a few glittering points of light arrayed across it, and more than that, this was where the people he was learning to call friends had first come to find their power, where they had traveled and fought and bled to secure the strength that had been used to then break him free of his old cycle. And now he was here. He'd been brought here for it to be shared with him too, freely. Arush's thoughts were broken next, as Alana parked the van violently enough to toss him into the driver's seat ahead of himself. All right, kids, let's get moving, she declared. Ty's holding the door. No stallin'. Go, go. Everyone grinned as they piled out. More philosophy could wait for the trip home. For now, they had adventure and action and exploration ahead of them. James shattered the drama of the moment. Christ, it's cold out here. Who allowed it to get this December? Time? Alana suggested. Oh hey, are we doing a Christmas party this year? Something like that, James said cheerfully as he took the steps up to his former workplace. Come on, I'm not sitting around out here. There's a dungeon waiting on us, he called back over his shoulder. And for different reasons, each of them smiled and followed.